So today we're here with Falcone Vineyards. We were welcoming Helen and John as we taste through some of their wine. On this flight for this week, we've got their Chardonnay, their Syrah, and their Annate, which I'll let them explain what the Annate is. Each one of them has fantastic scores and is really good representative of the Paso Robles area. One of the cool things I think is about Falcone that came to us is that they don't have a tasting room. So if anybody goes up to Paso Robles, you probably see signs for their vineyard, but there's no place to taste. So this is really fun to have them in the shop to explore their wines and provide the community an opportunity to be able to buy some of their wines and enjoy them at home. With that, I'm not going to steal the show here. This is really fun for us to have you guys in. I'm going to turn it over to Helen and John, and they're going to talk a little bit more about Falcone and where they came from and their history, and then we'll taste some of the wines. With that, welcome Helen and John.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I guess maybe I'll start a little bit.
Yeah.
Since I'm a little more of the veteran of the two, even though we've both been in the wine business a really long time. I'll be on my 46th harvest this year.
Wow.
Started in the late 70s and have been all over California personally. Worked in Monterey County, now Santa Barbara County. Paso Robles is where our vineyard is. Also up in Napa Valley for 13 years. That's where Helen and I met. And this project is a passion project. So it's something that we always wanted to do because we've been winemakers for other operations for many years. And we started this back in 1999 when we bought the property in Paso while we were still winemakers in Napa. And how I didn't get gray hair trying to develop a vineyard while I was living in Napa and developing it in Paso. I'm not sure how the heck that happened, but
it was a 4-hour trip away.
Quite the adventure. So I'll let Helen talk a little bit about her history here too.
So I started in the food industry, working for the New Zealand Dairy Board, and I was in research and I was developing hypoallergenic proteins for infant formulas and enteral products. So I was living in Napa Valley and involved in tasting groups and helping friends pour at wine festivals. All my friends were in the wine business. And after 6 years, I decided to make a change. So my first job was at Beringer Vineyards, and it was like going to college. I had the biochemistry, microbiology background. I was a home winemaker at the time and making little tiny lots of Pinot from Sonoma County Pinot grapes. And I learned so much there and then went on to work at other wineries. And each place I worked, learned a lot. John and I met at Coder New Napa, which was all Method Champenois sparkling wine at the time. And it's now called Artesa down in Carneros. Anyway, fast forward now, this fall will be my 31st commercial harvest. So our brand, it's very small. We only make about 1,500 cases a year under Falcone Family Vineyards label. There's a lot of experiences with different vineyards and different challenges and successes that both John and I bring from our different experiences. And in the late 90s, we would come down to Paso Robles quite frequently to visit John's brother, Jim, who's a chiropractor in Templeton. And we got to know the area and we thought, wow, there's just so much untapped potential here. And honestly, there weren't that many wineries, a handful of wineries and maybe a dozen vineyards, and quite a bit of the fruit was going up north, being sold to North Coast larger operations, including Beringer.
A lot of the vineyards that were planted were with very large operations that were taking their grapes north or quickly producing it and then moving it north to blend and bottle up there at that time. So we had gone through this massive replanting in the Napa Valley of vineyards because of phylloxera damage. And all of this new technology was sort of thrust upon California wine world. And we were part of all that experimentation. And at that time, really wanted to start a little brand, but it's very difficult to do and just finding time to do it. And we fell in love with the Paso area. We bought this piece of land. We actually traded what I like to say was a crappy rental house for in exchange for a piece of land. It was just bare land. And it took us about 6 months to kind of get off and running, but we did weather data from local weather stations in the area. We did soil sampling and selected our spot.
Yeah, so before we decided on the property to buy, John did all this research with historical weather data and the soils maps.
So we found it very similar to Rutherford, Oakville climate. So when we decided to plant, that's always a difficult thing. You know, what do you put in and what can we sell? And at that time, Cabernet was a no-brainer for us with our history in Napa and all the climate and soil data that we had. But Paso Robles, from a fine wine area, wasn't really known for Cabernet at the time, but we knew we could grow great grapes there just based on our history and what we'd learned in the North Coast. And Syrah was the other choice, which was the up-and-coming red variety for the Central Coast, kind of their Cabernet, if you will, at that time. And we were a little sketchy on whether we should plant Syrah because it was a fairly new variety at the time, you know, just a handful of wineries producing it. We couldn't go out and taste a bunch of wines. We had to go find material that we felt comfortable that we could plant that was clean. So had to do a lot of research on Syrah. Cab was actually a lot easier. So we split the vineyard. It's 8 acres of planted vines, and we split it up half and half, half to Syrah and half to Cabernet.
And we planted it in July 2000. So our first harvest was 2002. And we made about 100 cases of Syrah and about 15 gallons of Cabernet that year. So it went into the Syrah. And in 2003, we had our first Cabernet. We had enough volume that we could bottle it. So
we've been doing it for a while, but it was literally a side job. So
we had full-time jobs to pay the bills.
Had to pay vineyard people to, you know, farm it to our expectations. And then we were working at wineries in Santa Barbara County. And, you know, part of our agreement was that we would be able to make our own wine there. So we don't have a facility. We just, you know, as I like to say, it was meat and potatoes. We have the grapes in the vineyard that we have control of, and you know, we're obviously making the wines, but we've been able to make them at facilities that we've worked at.